And welcome, everyone. Thanks for tuning in tonight. Tonight's topic is once you're assigned, what comes next? My name is Sandy, and I live in a little town in Alaska called Delta Junction. I've been with the Red Cross for about 3.5 years. Um, I am the regional sheltering lead here, and I also hold a few gaps. I am operations management generalist supervisor and a mass care sheltering supervisor as well, in addition to a few other gaps. I was first deployed in September of 2018, and I went to a hurricane in a feeding gap. So it was a mass care feeding service associate gap. Um, I loved it. I loved everything about it. I was quite nervous before I went. I didn't really have any idea what to expect, didn't know how to pack. And so we decided to put together this series for tonight to kind of help folks out and clear up some of that confusion and that nervousness. So after my hurricane deployment, I went to a wildfire, and then after that, I went to an earthquake, and then I went to a couple more wildfires. Then I did a multi-family fire, which was an apartment building fire. And then I did another wildfire. And then lastly, the last one that I was deployed on was a winter storm. So I've been out in mass care, sheltering, feeding, and reunification, and as a generalist supervisor. I've also gone out in information and planning, doing disaster assessments, and I have done staff services, staff planning and support. So you can deploy virtually these days, or you can deploy in person. I find that I've got a personal level of satisfaction with mass care positions. Um, I just personally benefit from the humanitarian roles, and I like the contact with our clients. So that's probably my preferred area. So the frequently asked questions that we get, how do I get on the list to be called? How does someone know to call me? You can check out the Disaster Responder Requirements job tool and the Disaster Responder Training Requirements on the Exchange. Those will give you the requirements for adding a gap. And so you'll take all your classes that you need, take your trainings that you need. You find those on Edge in your volunteer connection profile. Then you request to have that gap added to your profile. We've got someone with a microphone on.
We lost our presenter's mic. They've been muted.
Sandy, your mic is on mute. Sandy, if you're talking, you're on mute.
Sorry about that. I'm not quite sure how that happened.
They turned off the one mic and it turned everybody off. So you got to turn it back on.
Gotcha. Okay. All right, so let's go back in here. Okay, sorry about that. I'm not sure how far back, so I'll just start this page and we'll go back here. How do I get on the list to be called? I said that you need to check out the Disaster Responder Requirements job tool and the Disaster Responder Training Requirements on the Exchange. You'll find that on your Volunteer Connection profile. So you can look in there and find out what classes and trainings you need from the Exchange, and then you go on Edge in your Volunteer Connection profile and take those classes and trainings. Once you've completed all of that, then you ask your DPM or your workforce engagement person to have your gap added to your profile. So once you have your gap, you need to go into your Volunteer Connection profile and update your availability. So that's where you state the dates that you are available and whether you're available only within your state, within your region, or within the division, or whether you're available to go on a national response, or whether you simply want to do a virtual response. So that's your availability. The next question we get is, how much time will I have to say yes or no if someone calls me? An immediate response is best. When there is a disaster, they're looking for people to fill those positions just as quickly as possible. So if you can say yes or no as soon as your recruiter calls you, you're in a better position. How much time will I have to get ready if I do say yes? We generally expect people to be able to travel within 24 hours. Like I said, time is of the essence, and they want you to be able to get out there and get on the ground just as soon as you possibly can. So the first thing that you're going to do after you say yes to your recruiter, you're going to be emailed an online pre-assignment health questionnaire. It's going to come to your email address. So your recruiter will have verified that your email address and your telephone number are correct, that you have in your volunteer connection. So 30 minutes is all you have to complete that pre-assignment health questionnaire, or the job goes back into the pot. So you need to be sure and get that done just as soon as possible. It's not an in-depth questionnaire. It's going to ask you some general questions like, do you expect to have difficulty meeting any of the physical or emotional requirements for the gap you're being assigned to? It's going to ask you if any of your loved ones were residing in the area directly affected by the disaster. So there's probably half a dozen questions like that. And then there will be an enhanced COVID-19 screening that probably another half dozen questions relating to COVID. So you're going to finish that health questionnaire and you're going to submit that. And then while you wait for your orders to come in, you can tune in on Edge. Again, you find that in your volunteer connection profile, and you're going to want to watch the 30-minute video that's called Deployment Fundamentals for Responders Traveling Away from Home. And it's going to answer a whole lot of your questions. So while you wait to receive your disaster relief operation assignment, you can watch this video. So once you get your disaster relief operation assignment, this is what it's going to look like. It also comes to your volunteer connection profile. So you will be able to see that there. This was mine for one of the disasters that I responded to last summer. It's going to have your name, your member number, and you're going to memorize that member number probably the first day that you're out on assignment. It's going to have the gap that you were assigned to. Then it's going to have the DR, so the disaster response number and the name. This one was 155, 2022. This was the Gold Country Command, July 2021 forest fire. It was a DR level 4. It had my departing from home date, my arrival date. And in Alaska, we usually, we have difficulty getting flights out. So when we're called to deploy, we usually try to head out the same day that we get called, because it usually takes us until the next day to get there. Whereas for most of you folks that live down in the lower 48, you can normally wait till the next day to fly, because they like you to arrive the day after that you've been assigned. Then your expected release date is normally 2 weeks after your departure date, unless you're going out in disaster health services, and those assignments are usually just for 10 days as opposed to 14. So your assignment record is going to have a lot of information on there about where you're going to want to fly into, where you're going to report to once you get there. This was the headquarters in Sacramento. Tells you what type of transportation. And then it also talks about the hardship codes. You want to be sure and pay attention to the hardship codes. When your recruiter calls you, they should go over these with you, and make sure that there's nothing there that you can't abide by. Anytime you're going out to a wildfire, you're going to have an air quality hardship code. Whether you're going to a hurricane response or a wildfire response, you're going to have extreme weather conditions. And then the one that's almost always there also is the housing shortage. And that pertains to where you're going to stay when you get there. We never know ahead of time whether we're going to be housed in hotel rooms or whether we're going to be housed in a staff shelter when we get down there. But you need to always be prepared for either scenario. Going to have your contact information on there. And you need to double check and make sure that is correct. And then, so once you have your assignment record and it's got all that information on there, the next things you're going to do to get ready to go is obtain a redcross.org email account. So you may already have one of those and you may not. If you don't, you can contact your disaster program manager to obtain it. It's not going to be something that would keep you from going out, but it's going to be something that you do need to have. So another good idea is to take a basic Excel training class. Those classes are available on your Volunteer Connection also. They're separate from the EDGE classes. It's an area called Percipio. So you sign in on EDGE just like you're going to take the EDGE classes, and you'll see a little red square that's called Percipio. And there you can find some of the classes for other computer skills such as Excel. So you're going to next want to get your plane ticket or your train ticket or however you're going to travel to the disaster. You're going to contact Carlson Wagenlit Travel. This is the number for them, 888-435-7913. They will make all of your travel arrangements. You never make your own arrangements with the Red Cross. What I like to do is look up flights beforehand because I know that I can ask them to check a certain flight for me and see if that one's available and if it falls within the dollar amount that they have available for me. So it helps. And they typically won't assign you to the longest flights with the worst layovers or the most awful connections just to get you the cheapest one. They're pretty good about working with that. So then you also need to obtain your mission card. Your mission card is used as a debit card or a credit card while you're on a response. And you can take cash out of an ATM with it, or you can use it as a credit card some places. You're going to get that from your home territory. Your recruiter should have the information on who you need to contact to obtain the mission card before you fly. And you want to be sure to do that before you fly because it will pay for your checked bag. So it'll cover your first checked bag, incidentals, gasoline if you're going to have a rental car, meals, and cash to reimburse yourself for any of those things that you might find that you need. So this page here is another piece of information that you can find on the exchange. This one's called Congratulations, You've Been Deployed to a DRO. It's the it's the Deployment Quick Fact on the exchange. So again, it's going to give you the number for Carlson Wagenlit Travel, and it says do not buy your own flight. This is what the mission card looks like in the second box here. You're going to watch for arrival instructions. These days, they're going to come in by email, they're going to come by telephone, and they're going to come by text message. And you're going to get numerous copies of the same thing. You'll be inundated with them, but that's good because it makes you feel a little more assured of what you're doing when you're headed out. Red Cross covers the cost of your first checked bag, and you can use that mission card to pay for that. Be sure you can access your Volunteer Connection profile, update your emergency and contact information. And let's see, you're going to check in or in process with staff once you get there. Lodging, you're going to expect to have at least one roommate. Possibly if you're in a hotel, although things are changing right now with the COVID protocols, or you're going to have maybe 100 roommates if you're in a staff shelter. The hardship codes, again, are the ones that I talked about that pertained to health situations, and you're going to want to pay attention to those. And work performance evaluations, everyone is entitled to one of those while you're on a DR, or maybe even more than one, depending on how long you're out and how many different supervisors you might have. You're going to work with your supervisor. They will be your direct contact for any problems on the DR. You want to focus on the client, be kind, be flexible, offer support, ask for support, be proactive, be a leader, offer to help, get to yes, and take care of yourself and each other, because you are the Red Cross. So this is a great piece of information to have around and refer to, or even to take with you. So another thing that you can look at, a great job tool, is the Disaster Responder Information Guide, which again is found on the Exchange, and you access that through your Volunteer Connection profile. You're going to look at pages 8 to 11, and that's going to give you, again, another copy of most of the information that you need. Sorry about that. So let's see, next up, and in the appendix to that Disaster Responder Information Guide, you're going to find a packing list. So the Red Cross has actually come up with a list for you to try to put things together. And it's great. I keep a copy of it right by my go bag that I try to keep pretty much ready to go. But I'm going to share with you a few of the things that I find that you really do need to pack, and some of the things that aren't on this list. Definitely you need your Red Cross ID. You should have one of those before you leave. I know the first time I went out, one of the people from the home office met me at the airport and gave me my Red Cross ID and my mission card. You need your driver's license or some sort of identification, health insurance cards. You're going to want your COVID vaccination card with you as well. Personal hygiene items, sturdy shoes or boots. When you are on an assignment, you cannot wear any open-toed shoes. It does say closed heel as well, but that's not quite as imperative as the closed toes are. You need to be sure and have the closed-toed shoes with you. Sun protection, appropriate clothing, insect repellent I've never had to have, emergency contact glasses, a pen, and a small notebook. These are for taking notes when you're at your stand-up meetings in the morning. And I always take more than one pen because they always walk off. And so just have a few pens with you and some sort of a small notebook, preferably something you can just stick in your pocket. Probably don't really need a plastic folder. Booker magazine is personal preference. Tissues and wet wipes. Another thing you want to take is a water bottle. And I take a personalized one, and that's what I have seen most people take with them these days. The Red Cross does give out either plastic water bottles or canned water, but we don't want to be using all the clients' supplies. So it's always good, and there's always a supply. You can find somewhere to fill up your own personalized water bottle. So that's a great thing to take along. Maps of the area or GPS, that's usually taken care of these days with a cell phone. That said, you need your cell phone and your charger. Another good thing that I find to take is one of those little car chargers, because you never know what kind of a vehicle you're going to wind up in. And a lot of them aren't up to date or have USB ports. And it's great to have that little charger on there, because you find yourself using Waze quite a bit, and you're going to be using Google Maps, and those will obviously drain your cell phone, but that's going to be some of the best maps that you can find. So you're going to want those. Flashlight and extra batteries. Being from Alaska, most of us up here never travel without a headlamp. So that's a good thing, and it doesn't take up much room, and you can stick that in. And a few other things that you might want to add to your list, your packing list, that I have found over the years: flip-flops to wear in the showers. If you're staying in a staff shelter, you're going to be using communal showers. So it'd be nice to have some sort of shoes that can get wet, like flip-flops. You're probably going to want to take a small backpack along. It's good to keep your personal items in, ladies, preferably that over a purse. There's usually always somewhere you can find to stash a small backpack when you're on the job. Another thing I have found helpful to take are Tide Pods. If you're staying in a staff shelter, most of the time you're going to be at a church or a community center or a school, and there may be washing machines and dryers that you can use there, but you want to take your own detergent. So Tide Pods come in handy. Obviously, you're going to want to take all of your PPE, your personal protective equipment, masks, hand sanitizer, and disinfecting wipes. Those will be available on the job, I'm sure, but it's always nice to have your own personal supply of those things. Your optional items, depending on the type of deployment, but again, like I said before, you never really know where you're going to be staying, and you may stay in a hotel some of the time, you may be in a staff shelter some of the time. So you want to take your own sleeping system. I take a blow-up camp type pillow. I don't take a sleeping bag because I find them to be too hot. I take a sleeping pad, like a camping pad, and I use that on top of the cot. And then I just take my own small packable blanket and sleeping bag liner. And I have found that that works real well for me. You also want to take a towel and washcloth. Sometimes those are provided, but it's not a given. So you don't want to be caught out there at the community shower without a towel. I've never needed to take my own toilet paper. Definitely you're going to want earplugs. If you're staying in a staff shelter and sleeping in the same room with 100 strangers, it can be a little difficult trying to get some sleep. So earplugs are a great thing to take along. Plastic trash bags, personal preference. Same thing with parachute cord, work gloves. If you're going out in health services, you do need to take your professional license or certification, and you also need your own stethoscope and blood pressure cuff. The rest of the items on this page are for inclement weather. So you just kind of have to gauge where you're going and look at the forecasts. Definitely usually always have a raincoat along with you. And then a couple other things that you might want to add to this page: a small power strip or extension cord. If you're staying in a gymnasium and you've got 100 other people in there, there may only be 8 or 10 electric outlets. So if you want to get your cell phone charged, it benefits you to take along a small power strip or an extension cord. I already mentioned taking your COVID vaccination card with you. I also have found it beneficial to take a small thumb or flash drive, and I put trainings, forms, toolkits on there that I find that I might need depending on what gap I'm going out in. So again, your closed-toed shoes. And another one that's very important is appropriate sleeping attire. You can't be sure you're going to be in a hotel and it's co-ed when you're in a staff shelter. And so you want to be sure to be appropriately attired. And I always appreciate when my neighbors sleeping close to me are also appropriately attired. So these are just a few things to pack in a personal first aid kit. The one thing I really want to emphasize on this page is your personal prescriptions, including vitamins. If you have an EpiPen, you need to be sure and take your EpiPen along. If you're planning on going out for 14 days, you always want to take more medication with you than you think you're going to need. Chances are you may find yourself extending, and you don't want to be caught out there without your personal meds. So take a few more than what's required there. The rest of those things there are just kind of anything that you would find in your own personal first aid kit. So any other expectations that you may have to meet? You're going to pack appropriate for the disaster type and the location, but don't take too much, because any overweight limit baggage, those charges are your responsibility and they're not reimbursable. So you can't put overweight charges for your suitcase on your mission card. Don't pack any expensive jewelry. Don't take your expensive electronic devices. No revealing clothing. No clothing bearing offensive or inappropriate slogans or advertisements for alcohol, drugs, or violence. The only other things I wanted to mention, to be sure and prepare your family, help them understand where you're going and that you're going to be away and that you may not have access to call them a lot, but kind of ease their minds as well. Be flexible. Always hold yourself to high standards of behavior. You want to be able to help people with the full array of the services that we provide. We are the One Red Cross. We want you to make us proud. So don't forget to pack a great attitude and a whole lot of patience, and have a wonderful, successful deployment. Iwe, you want to see if we have any questions from anyone?
Yes, thank you, Sandy. It's
Uh-huh.
so wonderful. So we have many comments in the chat. Some of we suggest the eye mask for sleeping, and also work gloves are a must if you're putting together or dismantling cots. Jane suggested fanny pack, and Andrea suggested headphone sets. And we have many other suggestions for Bronner's soap. Is super concentrated and biodegradable.
That's a good one. Dr. Bronner, yes.
Dr. Bronner's. And
Yes.
Alex brought up a good point, as in do not deploy unless you have your own health insurance, can afford copay for urgent care emergencies, and are sure insurance will cover you at your destination. And we also have multiple ones for earplugs. So do we have any questions? I do see a hand raised. It's a phone number I've called in the beginning of the session. The phone number is 503-440-2085. Do you still have a question, or was just accidental hands up? Okay, do we have any other questions? Wow, no questions? Okay, Cynthia brought a good point as well. Having your Teams, Microsoft Teams, downloaded on your phone before you deploy the apps, or you can also install on your computer before you deploy as well. And Chris suggested that if the area may have limited or no cell service due to disaster, download offline Google Maps to your phone before going. Great tip. So Jane has a question. Jane asked, what do you do if you arrive at the destination and it's very late in the evening and the headquarters is closed? What do you do?
In that case, they will give you information. That's just another one of either the text messages or emails that you will get. And it will give you your arrival information and tell you if you arrive prior to, say, 5 p.m., please go to headquarters, and it gives you the address. It will tell you if you arrive after 5 p.m., report to the Hampton Inn and Suites, and it will give you the address that you need to go to. So they pretty much cover everything very well with that.
Perfect, thank you. Ronald, could you turn off your camera? You're a guest. I'm not able to turn off your camera. Thank you. And Jean, you had a question.
I think it was answered in the chat about the online QR codes for the COVID vaccine as opposed to an actual paper.
Got it. Perfect. Thank you. So we also have comment saying, don't forget to bring a small paper tablet and pencil. If you do not get those texts or you arrive to the reporting hotel and they have no room, refer to the IAP for staffing. So thank you, Alan, for bringing this up, which is our next topic as well. IAP stands for Incident Action Plan. And next session, we're going to talk about how to read it. Because for some of us, incident action plan, sometimes it can be super long. If it's a level 6 DR, if it's a national DR, it's probably going to be 30, 40 pages. So we're not going to expect you to read every single page of the of the IAP. So we're going to talk about what do you need the most in order to deploy to the DR. Okay. We have another comment says take a copy of your prescription for meds and eyeglasses, contact lenses as well. Good point. And also your contact lenses, the solution as well. And I'm sure everyone knows that already, but contact lenses, the solution, you do not have to, the solution, even if it's greater than 3.4 ounces, you do not have to check the luggage. You just would have to show to the TSA and they'll test it just to make sure that it's contact lens and solution, and they'll let you go. Cynthia mentioned face masks, extra for you to use. William has a question. The question is, how do you find out who will be your supervisor?
You normally don't find out until you get there. It's usually there are quite a few positions that are open that they fill all at the same time. So you may report to, if say you're going to go work in a shelter, you will report to the shelter and there you would meet your supervisor. Every once in a while, the recruiters do have the supervisor's name when they recruit you. And they will put that in your volunteer connection, but I've never been fortunate enough to have that much information for mine. So
I have a follow-up question. So you don't know who your supervisor is. How do you find out? Whom do you contact first? And how do you find out for the, one of the things that we often encounter is you get called urgently, you deploy right away. And when you get there, you're just waiting. So what can you do?
There's a lot of waiting, especially in the first days of a DR. That's one of the things that I need to stress to everyone is to just be very patient, be very flexible. You're going to have your cell phone with you, maybe have a book with you at the same time, and then offer to help. Just offer to help with whatever you can. That was how I got out the very first time that I went. We had been waiting and waiting and waiting, and they needed box truck drivers. And I never would have dreamed that would have been what I was going out to go do. And that's what I wound up doing because that's where they needed me. So you just have to be super flexible and super patient.
Thank you, Sandy. And I also wanted to provide my input for my real experience back in for Northern California. I was deployed and I was the mass care lead for the district. We had over 500 people on the ground. When I was deployed, of course, I left right away within 24 hours, got there. Before I actually got into the hotel room, I didn't even open the door yet. I got a call from the mass care chief that particular time and says, can you go out right now? And I said, sure. So not knowing that I was the only one that went out, and subsequently the following day, I became the mass care lead for the district. And we didn't know how many people we had on the ground. What we knew was, so this is related to the staff request, as in, how do you know who your supervisor is? You usually know who your supervisor is if the person requested for staffing, the staff that put their name on it. But sometimes during a disaster, National will send a pushback out that you might not know who it is. So for my situation, we had lightning complex fire, and National was expecting more lightning fires in complex and everything. So they sent us 500 people without really knowing who we can deploy. So for the whole, I had so many people call me and saying, can I deploy now? Not understanding that sometimes it's a little bit hurry up and wait, as in we wanted to deploy as soon as possible.
But when you get there, because things change or things, we have other things to take care of as priorities, so we're having to wait or pushing into another gap as well. So patience is the key, flexibility. We want you to help. We want to help you as well. But sometimes give us a little time. You can probably ask your supervisor as in what the situation is or what is the expectation. Okay, so I do see the comment. Can we summarize all the suggestions in an email? Sure, we'll send out the follow-up email as well. We have another question. The question is, if we're in a shelter, Sandy, you would have to unmute. I muted all because we had a background noise.
Okay. Yep. Okay, there we go. Yeah, it was that's what I was telling you about. So, and then also there was another question back up the way, from Jane about, is it awkward to share a room with a stranger? I know in the past when I've had to share a room with someone, they staffing set it up to where one of us was on day shift and one was on night shift. So we weren't both in the room at the same time, which works really well. So that's one option.
Okay, so I see several comments in the chat asking us to talk about the holding patterns, which I talked about briefly. Sandy, do you want to touch a little bit more on the holding patterns that we have?
I was in that situation in California last year. They put us on a standby team, and so we were there at headquarters and on standby, just waiting to see if we would be needed to staff a shelter. So I just picked up whatever jobs I could at headquarters. Just offer yourself up to be of help to someone. I went on a road trip and delivered ink cartridges to another shelter. I helped run copies for somebody. So and someone has advised to take edge classes for positions that you may want to be able to fill. But yeah, you just have to, like I said, be patient, be flexible, and know that sometimes you will be put on standby.
And standbys are important. John Holly, you're on the call. I know you recently deployed to Kentucky, and you also experienced that you were not deployed. I mean, you were not assigned to the same position as you deployed with. Can you talk a little bit more about that, John Holly? I'm sorry, I'm putting you on the spot.
Yeah, can you hear me?
Yes.
Hello. Okay, yeah. When I first arrived to Kentucky, originally, we rushed to the HQ from Nashville, and when we arrived, they were saying that all the mass care positions were closed. Well, all the shelters were closing that day, and that they moved us over to EAS stations. So we did EAS stations for another 3 or 4 days, and then we were moved into SRT, and then we spent the probably next 30 to 40 days doing SRT. So yeah, I mean, it was completely unexpected, but it was just something that we decided, and it just felt like the right thing to do. And I think that it was probably one of the best experiences I'd had. Not expecting to do SRT, but the experience with Cynthia Fisher, it was pretty amazing. So yeah, I mean, you have to just be semper gummy when you show up and just be available to do anything that you're capable of. That's all. Thanks.
John, what's SRT?
Shelter resident transition.
Great, thank you. So we also have multiple suggestions in the chat for bringing your own pillows. You can bring your sleep bags and everything. So another thing that I want to point out is something that I told another group with that. So the other day I was reading an email, and inside the email has an article. So basically they did a study, they did a test, 3 groups of people. The first group, they all were tasked to walk 10 kilometers. I think that's about 6 miles. The first group, they didn't tell what the group is going to do. They just said, just keep walking. They didn't give any additional information. The second group, they told the participants that you're going to walk 10 kilometers, but they didn't give a time frame. They didn't say anything. The third group, they told the participants that you're going to walk 10 kilometers, but along the way, they had countdowns. They had 10 miles left, 10 kilometers left, 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. So the end results were the first group, the one that they didn't give any information besides this, you just have to walk. They stopped after 20, 30 minutes because it was too tiring, it was too hot, they didn't know what to expect. Group number 2, they knew they were going to walk 10 kilometers, but since there were no signs anywhere, they didn't know if they were walking at the correct direction because there were no signs. They didn't know if they were walking towards the east, west, or south, or north. So they also stopped halfway. The third group, they actually finished. They were not exhausted. They were actually very happy, excited, and they finished this whole long journey of 10 kilometers. Moral of the story is that when we have the clear expectations, when we know what to expect and what to communicate, so then you know how to achieve them. By having the countdowns of 10, 9, all the way to 1, they know what to expect. So I think by having this session is also to let everyone know that deployment is hard, is difficult. We rely on you for being flexible. Our clients need you. And also it's on the other perspective, as in talking about staff request. When a leader submits a staff request, we want to make sure that we actually know we were submitting, that to submit an accurate request. So then when an incoming volunteer is coming, they know whom to report to. If you don't, I do encourage you to call your supervisors or to call your staffing just to see if you have other opportunities that you can do. Like Sandy mentioned, like John mentioned, he was deployed as shelter supervisor, but she actually went to shelter resident transition team. So those, we are all flexible. So this is the how to end there. Okay, let's see if there's anything else that we need to see on this chat. I do see more comments on how to make a pillow there. Do we have any more questions? Okay, I do not see any questions. So we will conclude today's session a little bit early. I do want to remind you that our next session is March 15th. It's next Tuesday at 6 p.m. Pacific Standard Time. We will be talking about how to read the incident action plan and how to read the SITREP. The SITREP is basically telling us what has been accomplished. I do see a hand up. It's the phone number of 503-440-2085. If you are talking, we cannot hear you. If you're in LA region, Los Angeles region, your hours will be logged in for this session. If you're in other regions, I suggest that you log in your own hours. Or if you have a leader on this team, then your leaders can log in your hours for you as well. Okay, so we will conclude this session. Thank you so much for attending tonight's session. We will see you all next week. Thank you so much, Sandy, for presenting.
Thank you, Yue, for your work.